produces the paper clips. But then in doing so, it's going to affect other parties. So the paperclip materials have to come from somewhere. Somebody's going to be employed to, sweep the floor of the factory. And then we've got the horror scenarios where the machine goes berserk and produces so many paperclips that it's suddenly turning, human beings into paperclips, turning the whole world into paperclips. So this is the horror scenario. And it's called the paperclip problem because we're saying, from very trivial kind of instructions given to a machine, it could create this calamity, this catastrophe. And the usual response to the situation is to say, well, let's create an ethics committee and it'll oversee the situation. And if the third-party interests are threatened, then we'll shut down the AI. This is the usual response. But let's look a little bit more deeply at what's going on here. What we're seeing is that the Ethics Council is really looking at third-party interests. So it's not so concerned with the technical production of the paperclips, it's all about the third-party interests. And it's the one with the power, the Ethics Committee has the power to shut down the artificial intelligence system. But those of you who've worked in fraud and corruption will immediately recognize this as a situation where we've separated the control and the accountability. And so it's always ethically troublesome when we separate those two functions. And let's look specifically at how and why. It introduces agency risk and moral hazard. And of course this is relevant because when we look at what the PECC lists as the risks to growth, we see that corruption comes in at number 5. And so it is an issue we need to deal with. So imagine an ethics committee that's looking out for third-party interests, but it has no objective standard for ethics and no oversight. And now imagine we've got the same third-party interests and they are influencing the ethics committee. And the ethics committee, of course, is running the artificial intelligence for the benefit of the third-party interest. So this is the situation we need to be cognizant of. And all parties will be saying they're doing this in the interests of AI ethics. But of course, we can see that we could have third parties who are promoting their own interests, and in a way that allows them plausible deniability, because when the machine's making decisions about whether we use, coal power or nuclear power or clean energy, that these decisions, which are being attributed to the AI, are actually being made by energy party lobbyists. So this one example where this could go wrong. And it's particularly an issue when we look at how these ethics councils are being recommended to be set up all around the world. And really what we've got then is a set of ethics committees which control the AI, which is like an alternate form of government, because it controls every aspect of the national economy, because it controls the artificial intelligence, it's making the decisions inside the knowledge economy. And it's completely unaccountable. So we can't allow this situation to arise. And what I'd recommend instead is that rather than setting up ethics committees with no oversight that are therefore vulnerable to third-party lobbying, instead we make sure that the ethics committee is only answerable to the law of the land, and that we have no laws that apply differently to machines and people. So if it's legal for a person to do it, it should be legal for an artificial intelligence to do it, and vice versa. And so we've got the law of one law, as I call this. And so the old paradigm was, let's create special ethics rules for AI. That's the old paradigm. New paradigm, same ethics rules for everyone. And they're set in with a political process that has political legitimacy. So specific policy advice, just to wrap up, to see how this information applies to multilateral trade organizations and Industry 4.0 and these players. So if you're a multilateral trade organization, implement the law of one law. Don't allow ethics committees to make all of the decisions and to take the decision power away. Set up free knowledge zones, meaning zones where knowledge is creatable by anyone, not just the first to market, not just the first to file a patent. And so in this way, we prevent gross income inequality from arising, because even those who are in the middle of the pack or down the end of the pack in terms of income have the means to improve their own situation because nobody's preventing them from using their own intelligence and knowledge to improve their life. Then the third recommendation would be to use causal AI policy analysis to make decisions about what's best when we're negotiating multilateral agreements. If we're Industry 4.0, certainly do set up your businesses inside trade zones that are intelligence friendly. And so this is a tip to both governments who will be setting up these environments and also to industry. Make sure you think clearly about where you want to create your new industry and do your investment. The knowledge sector is absolutely the place to invest, and you too should think about using causal AI for your knowledge strategy. If we're a bank, then investigate the idea of knowledge objects and the ability to trade in them, and the idea of using them as an alternative to fiat currency, because we've suddenly got the opportunity to deploy a digital object with its own intrinsic value that doesn't need to be exchanged for physical goods in order to have value, and therefore introduces a new gold standard, gold-backed standard, except we've got a different source of knowledge now, that can become the basis for a new currency, currencies of the future. And then finally, governments should be facilitating all of these changes also. They've got a very important role to play. First, in creating open competitive markets, not monopolies. The efforts they take to participate in multilateral trade agreements that create trade-friendly zones. Resist the urge to tax and tariff AI. I know it's very tempting. Whenever you see some new knowledge source, you imagine there's great wealth and we should tax it immediately in order to share the wealth. But I'd advise caution there because we don't want AI to move offshore. Maintain a very careful watching brief on the ethics conversation. Don't let that get out of your control. And finally, don't be too concerned about loss of jobs, because if we try to save jobs by resisting AI, all we will be ensuring is that our nation drops out of the knowledge economy. So I'll just leave you with this final thought that so many people say to me two things. On the one hand, they say, where's my job when artificial intelligence is here? And on the other hand, they say, artificial intelligence is here, there's so much work to do to understand this new technology and understand how I can apply it to my business. And so if we just see the connection between those two halves, we discover exactly what our job is. Our job is to learn. And when we learn, we're completing this circle, and we're updating our tradition, our traditional ways of thinking, and we're expanding the circle and incorporating new learning, new knowledge to create new traditions which are going to support us all and therefore realize the vision of seeing artificial intelligence to a portal to a better future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We're being agile to respond to changing circumstances as they happen. So we're going to continue with the panel, and when the minister comes, we'll stop and then allow her to give her speech. So the next speaker, we have a panel of three. The first panelist is Bert Hoffman. He's the director of East Asia Institute, National University of Singapore, but he's also an old friend of Indonesia, spending many years here when he was with the World Bank.
Well, thank you. And having spent a lot of time at the World Bank, I'm totally used to being interrupted by Sri Mulyani, so that works for me. Look, I'm afraid I'm going to be the pessimist in the room. We've heard fantastic stories on what new technology is going to bring us and how wonderful it's going to be. And yes, there are a few adjustment issues here and there, and employment and inequality. But overall, we have a bright new future. And we just heard new institutions that are going to create trust and knowledge zones. Fantastically interesting. I'm going to talk about something related to technology, but it's about the trade war, or the tech war, or the Cold War, or should I say the cool war. It might be a Cold War, it could be a cool war. And what at the moment is influencing a lot of, at least my thinking on tech, is the short to medium term impact of the conflict between the United States and China. And so let